The sky didn't fall the day the Justice League turned evil. It went silent. No alarms, no invasions, no warnings. Just the sudden, horrifying realization that the people who once saved the world were now watching it and deciding who deserved to live in it. Metropolis learned first. It always did. One moment, Superman hovered above the city like a guardian angel, cape catching the sunlight, symbol blazing with hope. The next, his eyes burned red not with rage, but with judgment. A criminal syndicate was wiped out in seconds, not arrested, not restrained, but erased. The crowd cheered at first. Then they realized Superman didn't stop. He turned his gaze toward the city council building. Corruption, he decided, was just another form of crime, and crime no longer deserved mercy. That was the day the world understood something had gone terribly wrong. Across the globe, similar moments unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. In Gotham, the bat signal lit the clouds as it always had, but Batman didn't answer to save anyone. He answered to secure control. Crime families vanished overnight, their leaders found bound in underground black sites that didn't exist on any map. Surveillance drones replaced gargoyles. Every phone call, every whispered plan, every fearful prayer was heard. Gotham became the safest city on Earth, and also the most terrified. Batman didn't rule with fear anymore. He ruled with certainty. On Themyscira, Wonder Woman stood before the Amazons, sword planted in the stone, voice echoing with divine authority. She spoke of a broken world, of weak men, of endless wars caused by compromise and restraint. Peace, she declared, could only be achieved through conquest. The Amazons sailed that very night, not as ambassadors, as an army. In the oceans, Aquaman sealed shipping lanes and crushed naval fleets that defied his decrees. The seas belonged to Atlantis now, and the surface world would pay tribute or drown. Nations tried diplomacy. Aquaman answered by raising the tides. And somewhere between heartbeats, the Flash was everywhere at once. Governments collapsed before they could react. Nuclear codes were removed from human hands in less than a second. History itself began to feel unstable, like reality was being rewritten faster than anyone could notice. Barry Allen told himself it was necessary, that freedom was chaos, that choice was the problem. The Green Lanterns tried to intervene. They were gone within an hour. Power rings shattered, constructs crushed, willpower broken by a league that no longer questioned itself. The universe watched Earth and quietly looked away. People waited for a speech, an explanation, some grand announcement from the heroes explaining why this was happening, how long it would last, and whether obedience would be enough to survive. The Justice League gave them none. They didn't call themselves tyrants. They didn't build thrones or wear crowns. They simply enforced order with godlike precision. Crime dropped to zero. War ended. Hunger vanished under mandatory resource control. And in exchange, humanity lost something it wouldn't realize was gone until it was far too late. Hope. Because when the Justice League turned evil, they didn't become monsters overnight. They became something worse. They became right. At least, that's what Superman told himself as he hovered above the ruins of Washington, D.C., listening to the last echoes of resistance fade into the wind. He remembered the faces of people he'd saved here once. He remembered believing in choice, in free will, in humanity's potential. And then he remembered how many times the world had proven him wrong. Batman stood beside him on a hovering platform of Wayne-Tech steel, cape unmoving, eyes hidden behind white lenses. Global compliance is at 92%, he said calmly. The remaining resistance cells would be neutralized within 48 hours. Superman didn't smile. He didn't need to. Good, he replied. Then we can finally move forward. Below them, civilians knelt in silence. Not out of worship, out of fear. Somewhere deep underground, far from satellites and speedsters and gods. A small group of survivors watched the broadcast on a cracked monitor. Old villains, broken heroes, ordinary humans who had lost everything. One of them whispered a question no one else dared to ask. If the Justice League are the villains now, who's left to save us? And for the first time since the fall began, the world held its breath not for salvation, but for rebellion. The first rule of surviving under the Justice League's rule was simple: never be seen. Cameras were everywhere, watching from the skies, from the streets, from devices people no longer remembered agreeing to carry. Batman called it preventative security. Superman called it peace. To the people hiding beneath ruined cities and abandoned subways, it felt like suffocation. The resistance didn't call itself a resistance at first. That word implied hope, and hope was dangerous now. They were just survivors, former Argus agents, ex-villains who knew how heroes thought, scientists who had watched their work twisted into tools of control. They gathered in places the League ignored, magic dead zones, deep underground bunkers shielded with alien alloys, pockets of reality bent just enough that even the Flash hesitated to linger. Lex Luthor was there, of course, not smiling, not gloating, just older, quieter, and far more afraid than he would ever admit. "I warned them," he muttered as he adjusted the cracked monitor, showing Superman's symbol hovering over half the planet. "I warned everyone what happens when gods decide they know better." Across from him sat someone no one expected to see alive. The Joker. Gone was the manic laughter, the painted grin. This Joker was pale, hollow-eyed, and silent for long stretches of time. Gotham, under Batman's absolute control, had broken something inside him. Chaos had no place in a world where every variable was predicted. "Bats finally won," he whispered once, almost sadly, "and it's boring." Their unlikely leader wasn't a villain at all. It was Lois Lane. She had survived Metropolis because Superman wanted her to, because some part of him still needed an anchor to the man he used to be. She saw him sometimes, watching from the sky outside her apartment window, listening to her heartbeat, convincing himself this was love, that this was protection. It terrified her more than his heat vision ever could. "He's not insane," Lois said quietly to the group. "That's the worst part. Clark truly believes he's saving us. All of them do." As if summoned by the thought, the world shook. Far across the Atlantic, Wonder Woman's forces clashed with the last standing coalition of human militaries. The Amazons moved like a golden tide, shields raised, arrows and spears shattering tanks as if they were toys. Diana walked at the front, sword glowing with divine fire, eyes burning with absolute certainty. She did not hate humanity, she pitied it. Her general stood before her, hands shaking, begging for negotiation. Diana listened. Then she struck him down in a single, merciless motion. "Peace cannot be debated," she said to the soldiers watching in horror. "It must be enforced." They surrendered moments later. In the oceans, Aquaman felt the imbalance long before the surface world noticed it. These seas were restless. Ancient creatures stirred, not in rebellion but in fear. Arthur stood upon the throne of Atlantis, trident in hand, listening to the whispers of the deep. He told himself that humanity had earned this punishment, that choking the oceans with waste, poisoning the waters, drilling into sacred depths, had consequences. Still, when he ordered the sinking of another coastal city as an example, his grip on the trident tightened just a little longer than necessary. The Flash tried not to think at all. Thinking led to doubt. Doubt led to hesitation. And hesitation could fracture time itself. Barry Allen ran constantly now, never stopping long enough to feel the weight of what he'd done. He told himself he was preventing disasters before they happened, removing dangerous people from the timeline, correcting mistakes before they became tragedies. But sometimes, in the fraction of a second between steps, he saw ghosts. Cities that no longer existed. Children who had never been born. Futures erased because they didn't fit the League's vision of order. He ran faster. Batman watched it all from the watchtower, now repurposed into a command center, orbiting Earth like an unblinking eye. Screens showed compliance graphs, predictive models, probability curves. Everything was under control. And yet, something bothered him. Patterns didn't lie. And lately, the numbers showed anomalies, gaps in surveillance, blind spots that shouldn't exist, events without clear causes. Someone or something was hiding. "Flash," Batman said over the comms. "I need you to check something." Barry hesitated, just for a heartbeat.
"Check what?"
"A place that shouldn't be there," Batman replied. "And if you find resistance," there was a pause, "neutralize it." As Barry vanished in a streak of red, Batman turned his gaze to a locked file, buried deeper than any other. A contingency within a contingency. Something he'd built long before this future ever existed. A protocol designed not to stop the Justice League, but to stop himself. On Earth, the Resistance felt the air change. Sensors spiked. Magic wards flickered. Someone screamed a warning just as the walls began to shake. "He's coming," Lex whispered. The fastest man alive. Lois clenched her fists, heart pounding. This was it. The end, or the beginning, of something worse. And then, just as the Flash was about to tear through their hiding place, time stuttered. Not stopped, not reversed, stuttered. Barry skidded to a halt, eyes wide, breath caught in his throat. For the first time since the fall, something had moved that he hadn't controlled. From the shadows stepped a figure wrapped in magic, older than speed, older than time itself. John Constantine lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "Hello, May," he said. "Fancy seeing you running on the wrong side of history." For the first time in months, the Flash felt fear. Barry Allen had faced gods, monsters, and living paradoxes, but nothing unsettled him quite like standing still when he knew he shouldn't be able to. The air around Constantine shimmered with sigils and half-forgotten spells, reality bending just enough to trip the Speed Force like a snare wire. "You can't be here," Barry said, voice tight, every instinct screaming at him to run. Batman mapped every probability, every threat. Constantine smirked, flicking ash to the floor. "Yeah, well, Bats never was much for believing in bloody miracles, or curses, or old magic that doesn't care about his spreadsheets." Around them, the resistance stared in disbelief. Some had heard of John Constantine as a myth, a warning parents told reckless heroes. Others knew him as the man who always survived while everyone else paid the price. Barry took a step back. "You're interfering with global stability." Constantine laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Listen to yourself. You sound like him now." That hit harder than any punch. In orbit, alarms flared across the watchtower. Batman's eyes snapped to the screens as red warnings bloomed like digital wounds. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Temporal drag, Speed Force disruption, arcane interference. 3 variables that should never intersect." "Superman," Batman said calmly. "We have a situation." Clark arrived in seconds, materializing beside Bruce in a blur of displaced air. He studied the data, jaw tightening. "Magic." "Yes," Batman replied. "And something else." Barry stopped running. Superman's fists clenched. Somewhere deep beneath layers of certainty and control, a flicker of concern sparked. Barry was the wild card, the heart. If he hesitated, the whole system risked destabilization. "I'll handle it," Superman said. "No," Batman replied. "If Constantine is involved, brute force escalates the threat. We need containment." Superman turned to him slowly. "Bruce, we don't negotiate with variables anymore." For a moment, the two stared at each other. Old allies, old trust, now strained under the weight of a world neither was willing to let go of. On Earth, Constantine crushed his cigarette underfoot and looked Barry dead in the eyes. "You've seen it, haven't you? The things you erased, the people who never got the chance to be better." Barry's voice cracked. "I've stopped disasters. You stopped possibilities." Constantine shot back. "There's a difference." P-ground trembled as a shadow fell over the resistance bunker. Superman hovered above, eyes glowing softly, dangerously. His voice carried through stone and steel alike. "Barry," he said gently, "step away." Lois Lane watched from the shadows, heart in her throat. This was the man she loved, and the god she feared. Barry shook his head. "Clark, we need to talk." Superman descended, feet touching the ground with impossible restraint. "There's nothing to talk about. The world is safer now." "Is it?" Barry asked. "Or is it just quiet because everyone's too scared to scream?" For a split second, Superman faltered. Constantine seized the moment. He began chanting, symbols igniting in the air, ancient names clawing their way into reality. The bunker walls peeled back like paper as magic surged outward, broadcasting a signal not through technology, but through belief. Across the world, others felt it. Aquaman staggered on his throne as the oceans roared in protest. The sea wasn't angry at humanity anymore, it was angry at him. Wonder Woman paused mid-march as the voices of fallen soldiers echoed in her mind, not accusing but asking why peace now required so much blood. And in Gotham, Batman stared at a screen showing a ghost protocol activating on its own. A failsafe he'd buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it was paranoia. Project Nightfall. A system designed to expose the League to the one thing they had eliminated from the world. Superman turned back to Constantine, eyes blazing now. "Stop." Constantine smiled sadly. Sorry, mate. This is where the story turns. The sky cracked, not with lightning, but with memory. Images flooded the air, cities saved and cities destroyed, lives protected and lives erased. Every decision the League had justified now laid bare before the world. People watched and remembered what freedom felt like. Superman screamed not in rage, but in anguish as the weight of every enforced choice slammed into him at once. And Batman realized, too late, that the greatest threat to their tyranny was never rebellion, it was remorse. Superman fell to one knee, not because he was weakened, not because magic bound him, but because, for the first time since the world went quiet, he felt everything he had forced himself not to feel. The faces, the voices, the moments where people had begged him to stop and he had called it necessary. The sky above churned as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Around the world, the effect spread like a shockwave. Screens flickered to life in homes that had been dark for months. Not League broadcasts, not compliance orders, memories, raw, unfiltered truth. A mother in Metropolis, watching the moment her son was removed from the timeline because a future algorithm predicted he might become a criminal. A soldier replaying the instant Wonder Woman cut down his commanding officer for daring to ask for mercy. A fisherman on the coast, reliving the wall of water Aquaman sent to make an example of a city that resisted tribute. People screamed. People cried. Some fell to their knees not in submission, but in grief. Wonder Woman dropped her sword. It hit the ground with a sound that echoed across the battlefield. Amazons froze mid-stride as Diana staggered back, hands trembling. She saw it now, not war, not justice, but domination wrapped in noble words. She had sworn to end suffering, and had created an empire built on fear. No, she whispered, this isn't peace. In the depths of the ocean, Aquaman roared as ancient leviathans circled him, their minds pressing into his own. They showed him drowned cities, poisoned seas, but also something else, humans trying to change, trying to heal what they had broken, futures he had erased with tidal waves. His trident slipped from his grip and vanished into the abyss. I became what I hated, Arthur said to no one. High above Earth, the watchtower shook as systems failed one by one. Batman stood motionless, watching Project Nightfall unfold exactly as he had designed it, and exactly as he had feared. He had always known this path ended here. He had just convinced himself he'd be strong enough to walk it anyway. This was inevitable, he said quietly. Behind him, alarms screamed as Green Lantern constructs breached the station rings, returned to their bearers, wills reforged by the collapse of the League's psychological stranglehold. Across the cosmos, eyes turned back toward Earth. The universe was watching again. On the ground, Barry Allen clutched his head as timelines slammed back into place, not fully restored, but no longer suffocating. The Speed Force surged around him, not angry, but relieved. For the first time in months, he stopped running. I'm sorry, Barry whispered. I thought I was fixing things. Constantine leaned against a shattered pillar, blood trickling from his nose, magic burning him from the inside out. Yeah, he muttered. That's usually how it starts. Superman rose slowly, eyes no longer glowing red, but wet with tears. He didn't bother hiding. He looked at the people around him, not subjects, not variables, but lives. Lois stepped forward. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she didn't. She looked up at him, the man she loved, and the god who had broken the world. You don't get to decide for everyone, she said softly. Not even you. Clark swallowed hard. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if I didn't control everything, I'd lose you, lose them, lose the world. And now? Lois asked. He looked around at the damage, at the pain, at the resistance that hadn't given up, even when hope was crushed. Now, he said, voice breaking, I don't know how to fix this. Batman finally turned from his screens. For the first time, he looked tired, old, human. We don't, he said. Not completely. Some things don't get undone. Silence fell. The League stood fractured, exposed, stripped of certainty. Around them, humanity stirred not, united, not peaceful, but awake. The age of tyranny was ending. What came next was far more dangerous. The world didn't celebrate the fall of the tyrants. There were no cheers, no sudden return of joy, no banners raised in the streets. When gods step down, they don't leave relief behind, they leave wounds. Cities were still scarred, families were still missing. Entire generations had grown up in silence, taught that obedience was survival. The Justice League stood together one last time, not as rulers, not even as heroes, but as people, forced to face the consequences of what they had become. Superman was the first to act not with power, but with surrender. He appeared on every remaining broadcast channel, every screen that still functioned, every device that had once been used to watch humanity. He did not hover above them. He stood on the ground. "I took your choice away," he said. "I told myself it was to protect you. I was wrong." People watched in disbelief as the man who had ruled the skies bowed his head. "I will not lead this world anymore. Not as its judge, not as its savior." Wonder Woman followed. She ordered the Amazons home, dissolving the empire she had built in a single command. Some resisted, most obeyed. Diana stayed behind, laying down her sword in front of those she had conquered, not asking forgiveness knowing she had no right to. Aquaman rose from the sea and spoke to the surface world not as a king demanding tribute, but as a guardian asking for cooperation. The oceans would no longer be weapons. They would be borders once more. Barry Allen dismantled the last of the temporal locks, restoring what could be restored and accepting what could not. He visited places that had never known him, people who should have existed but didn't. He didn't try to fix them. He listened. For once. And Batman vanished. Not in death, not in defeat. He left behind the watchtower, the systems, the protocols. He dismantled every contingency except one, a final safeguard ensuring no single being, hero or otherwise, could ever dominate the planet again without resistance. Bruce Wayne understood something the others were still learning. Power doesn't corrupt because it is evil. It corrupts because it convinces you that you're right. Months passed. The world rebuilt slowly, unevenly, painfully. Governments returned, flawed and fragile. Heroes stepped back into the shadows, watched now with caution instead of faith. Some were welcomed. Others were never forgiven. The Justice League did not reform. Not because they couldn't, but because they shouldn't. Superman stayed on Earth, helping quietly, never above the clouds. Wonder Woman returned to the Themyscira to reflect on what strength truly meant. Aquaman guarded the seas from threats that didn't involve humanity. Flash became a protector against his time bound by limits he chose, not ignored. And somewhere, in a small, unmarked grave beneath Gotham's rain-soaked soil, a plaque bore no name, only a warning. No one decides alone. The age of tyranny ended, not with victory, but with humility. And the world learned a terrifying, necessary truth. Even heroes must be held accountable. Because the day they stop listening is the day hope dies again. In the end, the Justice League didn't lose because they were defeated. They lost because they remembered what it meant to be human. Earth survived their tyranny, but it would never forget it. Statues were not rebuilt. Symbols were not restored to their former glory. The world chose something harder than worship, it chose vigilance. Children were taught the stories not as legends of perfect heroes, but as warnings about unchecked power, even when it wears the face of hope. Superman learned that saving the world does not mean owning it. Batman learned that preparation without trust becomes oppression. Wonder Woman learned that peace forced by fear is just another form of war. Flash learned that time must be lived, not corrected. Aquaman learned that protection must never become punishment. They carried those lessons like scars, permanent, painful, necessary. The Justice League did not vanish from history. They became a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, should ever stand above choice, above consequence, above the people they claim to protect. But the most dangerous moment in any world is not when villains rise. It's when heroes decide they can't be wrong. And somewhere, beneath a sky that was finally loud again with life, humanity took its first uncertain step forward, free, fragile, and responsible for its own future once more. Not saved, but awake.